I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now. Devil May Cry 5 is fantastic and exactly what I wanted in a Devil May Cry sequel. Hideaki Itsuno and his team over at Capcom knocked it out of the damn park with DMC5. Sure, it may have taken over a decade to get here, but the king of stylish action games is back and I could not be happier. Taking place after the events of DMC4, Devil May Cry 5 opens with a Clyfoth, essentially a giant demon tree, appear in the middle of Redgrave City, which is harvesting humans for their blood. This turns out to be the doing of the Demon King Urizen, and it's up to Dante, Nero, and the mysterious newcomer V to put an end to this new threat. However, things don't go too well, as Urizen is seemingly much more powerful than anyone could have thought, and actually manages to defeat Trish, Lady, and seemingly even Dante, forcing Nero and V to make a retreat, and this is just in the prologue. From here, Nero teams up with Nico, who's built him a demon-killing robot arm, and it's up to them and V to put a stop to Urizen. The story in the DMC games have always managed to strike a really nice balance between melodrama and off-the-wall craziness. It never takes itself so seriously that the story and characters stop being fun, and in the case of Devil May Cry 5, it's just a blast from beginning to end. On top of that, it's just really nice getting to see Dante, Nero, Lady, and Trish again after all this time. V and Nico also proved to be great additions to the cast as well. On top of that, there's also some really fun Easter eggs sprinkled in there for longtime fans too, which is always fun to see. But of course, the most important part of the DMC games is its gameplay, and since the series beginning it's always been about one thing, and that's style, and DMC5 has that and then some, with a combat system that's insanely fun, has crazy depth, and is incredibly stylish. All the air combos, pause combos, jump cancels, gunslinging, sword swinging you expect from a DMC game is here, and it feels so damn good. And with 3 demon hunters to play as, and all of them feeling pretty unique from one another, DMC5's combat has a lot of variety too. Nero, just like his DMC4 counterpart, wields the Red Queen, a sword that can rev up like a motorcycle, and the Blue Rose, a giant revolver. New to his arsenal are the Devil Breakers, robotic arms that provide Nero with a variety of abilities, from energy blasts to rocket punching to time bubbles. Figuring out what each breaker does and how to implement them into your overall gameplay is super important. Be careful though, because if you get hit while using a breaker, they, well, break, and you'll equip your next available one. On top of that, you can also forcibly explode your current breaker, which is useful for both creating space between enemies and combos. And even if you lose your Devil Breakers, it's not the end of the world, as they can be found scattered throughout each stage and purchased at Nico's shop, where you can also set your loadout. This adds a nice layer strategy, as you can formulate a gameplay plan based on what breakers you have equipped. Dante brings his crazy weaponry and his signature style system back from DMC 3 and 4, and like in 4, you can swap between each style at any point. Each style augments an aspect of Dante's gameplay. Swordmaster gives him more options for his melee weapons, Gunslinger for his ranged weapons, Trickster gives him more mobility like dashes and teleports, and Royal Guard gives him the ability to block and counter. Dante's core gameplay revolves around mixing and matching his weapons and styles to create insane combos, and in terms of his weaponry, he's got his classic Rebellion sword and twin pistols, Ebony and Ivory, but beyond that he's got stuff like a shotgun, the Balrog, a sort of gauntlet and greaves pair that allows him to switch between a boxing and breakdance mode, the Cavalier, a pair of chainsaw swords that turn into a motorcycle, and a hat and scarf called Dr. Faust that uses red orbs to attack his enemies. Yeah, Dante's weapons are pretty nuts in this game, and of course he's got his signature Devil Trigger too, which gives him enhanced strength, speed, and a healing factor for a limited time. And finally, there is V, the mysterious new character, whose playstyle is pretty unique. I can't say I've ever seen it in any action game, Devil May Cry or otherwise. Essentially though, he's a ranged summoner, so unlike Dante and Nero, V relies on his familiars to do his fighting for him. He's got Griffin, a bird demon for his range attacks, Shadow, a cat demon for his melee attacks, and Nightmare, a giant golem thing that serves as V's Devil Trigger equivalent. And unlike Griffin and Shadow, Nightmare can operate on his own, though you can, if you want, ride on top of him to get more direct control. Essentially, V's gameplay is about sending out his familiars to do his bidding, all the while V stays back, reads his poetry to charge his Devil Trigger to call down Nightmare, and avoid any stray enemy that comes his way. V, however, does need to be the one that finishes off each enemy. You can't just run away forever, you do have to engage at some point, and that's where V's teleporting cane attacks come into play. While it can slow things down a bit, it's still a pretty fascinating moveset, though it does take some time to get used to things. For example, I had trouble remembering that directional-based inputs are based on V's position and not his familiars. Dante, Nero, and V offer gameplay styles that all feel different from one another, and while V does feel a bit underexplored in his moveset when compared to what Dante and Nero can do, I still greatly appreciate the game devs trying new things with V, even if it may be a bit too easy to get S ranks with him. At the end of the day though, V, Nero, and especially Dante are so fun that it more than makes up for it. If there's one thing that's abundantly clear about DMC5, is that it's a game that knows what its strengths are and executes on them perfectly. Yes, there's a bit of platforming sprinkled in on a few of the missions, but at its core, DMC5 is all about combat. It never tries to shoe in other elements like set-piece moments, QTEs, or on-rails sections, and I for one absolutely love it for that. DMC5 is all about fighting enemies, learning attack patterns, and being incredibly stylish, and it does that brilliantly. And the same can absolutely be said about the boss fights too, which all serve first and foremost to be about testing your skill, knowing what attacks you can jump over, or which attacks you can sidestep, or when you just have to get out of the way completely is paramount to success. And if you want to style on the bosses you can, but it's up to you to get that done, because the bosses sure as hell don't make that easy. As you hammer away at each boss, they'll also start incorporating more moves into their move pool, so you best be ready. On top of that, there's also a really nice variety to the bosses too, from the time-warping Garian Knight to the gigantic Gilgamesh fight to the epic duel with the Cavalier Angelo. I absolutely love the boss fights in this game, and overcoming each challenge was so damn rewarding. Mission structure works mostly the same like in previous titles. It's broken down into 20 missions along with a prologue. Most missions you play as a predetermined character, but there are a couple missions that allow you to choose. Furthermore, there's also asynchronous multiplayer, where you'll link up with other characters during certain missions. So for example, in a mission as Nero, you may see V fighting a horde of enemies in the background, and that'll be another character, and vice versa. It's a neat little feature, and it all comes to head in Mission 13, where all three characters get to come together to take on enemies. And I'll be honest, it's actually pretty cool to see multiplayer implemented in a Devil May Cry game, and if the Bloody Palace DLC has any of these options, that'll be really exciting. Unlike previous titles where you could purchase or find consumables to replenish health and Devil Trigger, in DMC5 you don't have that option. You can still find green and white orbs for recovering health and Devil Trigger though, but when you die you can only revive if you either have a gold orb, which can be found or purchased at Nico's shop, or by using red orbs. Each time you buy a gold orb the price goes up, and likewise each time you use red orbs to revive the price goes up too. This makes it very important to do well during missions and get those S ranks, because the higher rank you get, the more red orbs you are awarded. There are microtransaction options for buying red orbs too, but honestly, you don't really need to engage with it. Personally, I never felt the need or desire to do so. The deluxe edition also has some extra devil breakers and weapon skins, and that's cool, but not really essential for having a fun time. Those live action cutscenes though are pretty hilarious. Replayability is also a big part of DMC5, and its 12-ish hour first playthrough feels like an ideal length, as it never overstays its welcome, making replay playthroughs an absolute joy. On top of that, there's also hidden blue and purple orb fragments to find for extending health and Devil Trigger, and of course, the 12 secret missions. To gain access to said missions, you must first find and align hidden blood symbols in some of the missions. After doing so, you'll be challenged to things like collecting a set number of red orbs within a time limit, or getting to an end of a segment without touching the ground, or fighting off enemies without getting hit. These two will net you blue and purple orb fragments. And of course, with replayability also comes the multiple difficulties. The normal difficulty shouldn't be too challenging for series veterans, but man, the Son of Sparta and especially the Dante Messiah modes are no joke. Be prepared to die. A lot. Not only do enemies have higher health pools, they also do a lot more damage, you fight more of them at a time, the tougher enemies show up earlier, and they're more aggressive. This also applies to bosses, who on top of all that also get new attacks, just to keep you on your toes even more. The higher difficulties may be rage-inducing at times, but man, there is something oh so satisfying about overcoming that challenge. Visually speaking, DMC5 looks fantastic. The color palette is a bit muted in comparison to previous games, but that's probably in service of the more realistic and highly detailed character models. On top of that, you also have excellent mocap and lip syncing, along with great vocal performances across the board that help really bring each cutscene to life. On top of that, there's also a nice variety of environments, from the streets of Red Grey City, to the ancient catacombs, to the overtaken Demon World, and unlike DMC4, you don't backtrack the entirety of the second half of the game, so that's a major plus. DMC5 also has a solid soundtrack, with Nero's theme Devil Trigger in particular being the right amount of over-the-top fun that fits the series so well. Though I will say, Dante's theme Subhuman is still a little weak in comparison to his old themes. On top of that, there's also dynamic combat music, so as you keep your stylish rank up, the more intense the music becomes, which is pretty fun. If there's one real blemish, it's that the frame rate on the standard PS4 version can't take a hit during combat. This either happens when you're fighting lots of enemies at once, or if there's lots of particle effects on the screen. Despite the dip in frame rate though, it was never really enough to sour my experience, but it would have been nice to have a consistent 60 FPS experience on the standard PS4 version. But from what I've seen of the PS4 Pro version, that seems to run a lot smoother. However, if frame rate performance is important to you, the PC version is probably the way to go. Devil May Cry 5 is the type of game that you can just tell that the developers poured their hearts and souls into making the best game they could possibly make. Fans of the series will absolutely love DMC5. To anyone that's never played a DMC game before, if a challenging action game that's all about being incredibly stylish sounds appealing at all to you, then yes, you should definitely check it out, because DMC5 is absolutely worth it. And that about wraps things up here at Ceej Gaming. If you enjoyed what you saw, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for future videos down the line. And if you want to follow this channel on social media, you can do so by following @Ceej Gaming on Twitter. This has been Ceej Gaming, and I'll see you guys next time.